Alrighty, so the next part of this lecture is going to be on apraxia, and keep in mind that we're not talking about childhood apraxia of speech. That was one that we already spoke about. This is going to be our acquired apraxia. So what is apraxia? So it's this inability to complete tasks, so purposeful or meaningful, like voluntary task, despite having this physical ability to do this. So it's not that our patients lack the physical ability to be able to do this, they do, but it's just the plan of being able to complete that that's being impacted. So what kind of causes do we have? So why does apraxia even come to be? So here are kind of our main causes of why someone might experience having apraxia when they wouldn't necessarily, and they weren't born with it, so not your childhood apraxia. But just think about kind of like your major traumas or that CVA, any kind of a tumor that would be pressing on certain parts of the brain, and any kind of disease that would be impacting the brain's ability to do this, to be able to voluntarily produce their speech sounds. And so we do have some various approaches, so treatments that you can think about. And again, we need to think about these approaches because when we are doing that initial eval, we have to be able to say like, okay, are any of these approaches going to work for this particular client? So for this first one, it has these steps that we take. So you would say something like, watch me. We're going to mouth what we're trying to get them to say. They will try this multiple times. They write it. You remove the writing. Then you ask a question to get them to say the target. And you're kind of role playing at this point. So again, you say, watch me. So watch is kind of that first one. You watch. And then you're going to mouth it. So we're going to mouth what we want them to say. They try. So then it's going to be their turn to try. And then we're going to write it. And then we remove the writing, right? So we're kind of scaffolding, right? Removing that writing. We ask a question to get them to say that target. And then we role play. And that's this first one. We're kind of working on structure. All right. And so and then what we're looking for is that content, phonation. You can also think about like, for content, I apologize. Let me back up. For content, we're looking for phonation. We might try memorized things. So like rhymes, we can try some phonetic drills. So just the sound, and then add a vowel, and then move the sound in, like move the position of the sound, then add phrases, and then add length. So I'll write these down for you. So again, you're looking for phonation. You can try memorized things, right? You can do a phonemic drill here. And you can just, what you're doing is just the sound alone, and then you can add a vowel, and then move the position of where that sound is happening, add a phrase, so like your carrier phrases, and then add length. So we want to check with our client at the moment that we do our first initial intake to say, would any of these treatment approaches actually help you? Because we need to know this before we're going to actually be writing the goal for the client. So that's why we're testing the treatment approaches out right away, even when we're looking at just the initial assessment, because we want to know what are we going to be writing into the goals? Because again, these goals are written quite differently than how other goals are going to be written. These are our medical-based goals. And so here is an example. So this is a speech goal. And so the patient will be able to state these like function words that we've selected ahead of time, that they can do it 80% of the time. And I didn't write this goal. This goal was given to me, just so you know, by a medical-based SLP. And she told me this is a common goal that she writes for her particular client. So you might see some structures here that haven't necessarily taught you in the past, but we want to make sure. I just wanted to give you an example of a particular goal that is currently being used in a medical setting. And so you really want to think about the fact that for these clients, we're really looking for that independent communication. This is really, really critical because that's what we're trying to increase, is that we want them to have that independence. And again, you'll notice that they're just saying minimal cues, and we're not saying what cues in particular. And we can discuss this further in class, but always keeping in mind that because apraxia can be a little bit unpredictable, we don't want to kind of stick to always the same cues over and over again. And so the next goal that I want us to look at is an AAC, or a communication repair goal. So again, this was written by someone else that was saying, this is a patient that they currently had and a goal that they had, so that you can kind of see the differences in the types of goals that we would write for different patients. So for this particular patient, we're looking to be able to repair communication. So because apraxia is so unpredictable and various productions will be being produced, it is really critical that our client has a way to be able to repair when those communication breakdowns are happening. And so for this one, what they're doing in the conversation is they're going to use these nonverbal strategies. And look how we have a lot of them. So pointing, writing, gestures, AAC book, etc. So we're not limiting them to one particular form of communication, but really honing in on that multimodal communication, total communication, and allowing our patient to be able to repair conversations in the best way that is able for them. And once again, minimal cues, but we're not saying the kind of cues, because this can be extremely flexible. So when it comes to just the basics of evaluating, so here's just a short case history, and one that we'll go over in class more extensively. But we have this, when we're first going in for this eval, we have this patient. They're going to express their concerns. They're going to talk about their current condition, and we're going to do this self-assessment. And this is really critical, and I'm going to show you a picture of this actually on the next slide. But it's really important that we look at our clients, their own self-perception and self-assessment of how they feel that this is impacting their life. It is, of course, critical that we're going to do an oral mechanism exam, which you're going to be learning in class as well, and we'll be practicing oral mechanism exams together. And of course, vision and hearing, we always want to conclude those. That's really critical. Can they see us? Can they hear us? Really important that those basics are taken into consideration. So we do have both informal and formal motor speech testing, and then a speech sample or communication sample is going to be really critical. And then that stimulability and probing, that's where we're looking at the treatment, where we're saying, are you able to do X, Y, and Z tasks? So this is all part of an initial evaluation. And then what we're doing is we're going to analyze the errors, the movements, all that subsystems and that intelligibility. And that's what's going to go into that report. And that's how we're going to make that qualitative, like this really great assessment, by looking at our client as a whole, right? That we're not focusing in on one particular thing, but we're saying, when I look at you as a whole, based on formal and informal measures, based on the sample that I've collected, what you can and can't do currently with help and without help. So like really that dynamic assessment. How am I going to be able to best serve you? What are the goals that I can write for you? And so here's an example of this particular survey. So I'm going to zoom in so you can see this. And then it's really important that we get this information from our client. So notice that it is about their speech. So this is that self-assessment, because the way that we perceive their speech might be vastly different than how they perceive their speech. Because remember, we didn't necessarily know the client pre the incident. And so how they perceive their speech, what's effective or not effective, it could potentially be vastly different. So it's really, really critical that we take into account what our patient has to say. It's their voice, right? It's their language, it's their voice, and it's really important that we're listening to their voice, so that when we are doing therapy, when we are picking treatments, when we are picking approaches and we're picking goals, that we are constantly taking our clients into consideration. We're talking about adult clients here. These are not little children. These are people who are going to have very strong opinions of what their goals are, how we're achieving their goals, and all those sorts of things. And if you do not have buy-in with them because you have not listened to their voice, you're going to have a really hard time with them in services, and you're probably not going to be able to see any progress with this particular client. So it's really important that you take this survey into account. So let's take a look at a little bit of a case history. So here's a 55-year-old female, and this is 18 months post a CVA, 2 CVAs. And so we're looking at her current conditions, and we're going to talk about, right now she has been diagnosed with spastic dysarthria. So, sorry, I probably should have put this up with the dysarthria. This is not an apraxia, but dysarthria one. So bear with me as I give you this particular example. But this is kind of her life, right? So we need to know kind of like what is the situation, what is her life situation. She's been social and talkative as a baseline, but now look at this. It's saying that in the case history, we're showing that she's choosing social isolation, which is really important that we note that this is really impacting this particular client's ability to just be herself, right? So the goal is to improve intelligibility. So I want you to go ahead and listen. So I want you to give a listen here.
Patient number 24, female, age 55 years. Diagnosis, spastic dysarthria. Now, count to 10 for me. All right, look at this picture again and tell me what's going on here. All right, and now, would you try to read some of this passage aloud?
All right, so as you can clearly see, there's been a great impact on this client's ability to just be able to produce speech sounds and be able to be intelligible to those around her. So obviously a huge impact on her social life. So this would be really important that we take all of these things into consideration. So additionally, we want to think about that oral mech eval and think about what is she able to do, what is she not able to do, and think about things like this bilateral parasite that's really that's really going to have an impact on her voice. She has those strained vocal quality. This is really impacting everything about her life. And you saw on the previous slide, in case you didn't see it, she is feeding, she is NPO with tube feeding. And so it comes as no surprise that we do have this severe weakness and that she's got this spillage going on as well, a spillage of secretion. So really important that when we're doing that oral mech that we're talking about what are the strengths and weaknesses that she does have. And then as you clearly heard, she has all types of errors going on. And then the movement, which of course you can't see, was she has a lot of muscle tension. The coordination is very low. Her respiration and phonation, articulation, prosody, and resonance are all being impacted, not being able to really sustain and have that good breath support, which of course, then what do we know about the intelligibility? Were you able to understand her? Did you understand anything that she said? And so it's really important that we take a look at how does she feel like this is impacting her? And it's just really important that you check those results to say, like, what is she saying about this particular thing? So this might be how it might come out for a dysarthric patient, some of the results that they might show you. And so just something that you would want to take into consideration. All right, so as I promised, we're going to break up these parts. So that's going to be the end of this particular recording. I'm going to stop here and do a third recording for our third and final portion of motor speech. But we will talk about this, of course, in detail in lecture, and we're going to practice a lot of these techniques in lecture as well. All right, let me know if you have any questions, and we will see you in class.